All right, so we're not going to take up too much of y'all's time because you're not really here to hear from us. But we did want to thank a few people before we get started. Min and Hillary, thank you guys so much for thinking of us and all of you to put on this really cool event. And as well, thank you to Dave, who's right there, for letting us invade his beautiful office, and his entire team as well for putting up with this for a little bit, and hope you enjoy some good whiskey tonight. But we really appreciate you hosting us tonight. And also thank you to Chris Fletcher for coming here and spending some time with us this evening. But I do want to, before we get started, mark how special this evening is. When we started the podcast back in 2016, we had a little hunch that whiskey was more about the people you're drinking it with than the booze itself.
We originally did this so that people would send us free whiskey.
That was an added benefit. We didn't know if it would work. It did, but details. But we had a hunch that it was more about the people than the whiskey itself, and that hunch has given us some of the coolest experiences in almost 9 years that we never would have thought we could have done. And I do think that tonight may be the coolest experience that we've gotten to do so far. Yeah. We made relationships with a lot of brands, tried a lot of good whiskey, met a lot of cool people. But what you're about to experience is something that we've never seen happen in the whiskey community. It wasn't our idea to do this. Jack Daniel's reached out to us and said, hey, we've got some cool stuff coming out. What if your people, the whiskey drinkers, try it before anybody else? Instead of it going and you seeing all the reviews and people like, oh man, I wish I could get it, but I'll never get to try it. What if y'all get to try it first? And that's what's about to happen. I've never heard of any other brand do that. But then there was a hiccup because we were going to do it early in February. And that hiccup was someone couldn't come. And we're like, well, who can't come? We had this date that's going to work. And they're like, well, Chris can't come. We're like, Chris who? Yeah. They're like, oh, Chris Fletcher. He's coming to do the event. And we're like, no one sends their master distiller to talk to Will and Grease and our friends. That's unheard of. So really, thank you, Jack Daniels. Thank you, Chris. Because, like I said, no one has done something like this. And I think it shows, it's a testament that Jack Daniels gets us. They get the whiskey drinker. They know who you are. They know who their people are. And, I mean, I don't know what else to say about that other than thank you all for understanding that it's about these people in this room and sharing the whiskey with them. So that's all I've got. I think we're going to invite Chris up here to talk a little bit about this evening.
Yeah. And we can go ahead and she starts the pours. We're good.
Yeah. All right, Chris, man of the hour.
That's good. We're going to do a duet later, right? All right. Well, I don't think I can say it any better than Will just did. But first, I want to thank Will and Grease for the introduction and also all the coordination, and thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, sir. Yeah, even more important is what's in that glass. But bringing people together—that's what whiskey does, and I think. Even more special that we're able to do it right here in the great state of Tennessee and not somewhere else. Maybe my wife's from Kentucky, so I always got to get a Tennessee jab in there when I can. Not that I don't love good Kentucky bourbon too. I do. But this is going to be special ultimately because there's whiskey here tonight to share with you all that hasn't been around since Jack Daniel himself was still alive and traveling back and forth from Nashville to Lynchburg, Tennessee, and wherever else he went. So that's a really, really cool thing. We will get to that all in due time. I want to start just a little bit talking about the whiskey itself and a little bit about me. I don't know many of you. I know a few people in the room. If some of you have heard me speak before, I'll apologize now. But just so you know a little bit of my background, I was born and raised in Lynchburg. How many people have been to Lynchburg, been to Jack Daniel's? Oh, very good. Well, we can take the Cliff Notes version from here on out then. So I grew up there and was around the distillery from a very young age. My granddad was a distiller. My mom's dad was a master distiller there until 1989 when he retired. So I was around the distillery as a kid. But honestly, growing up in Lynchburg, as you guys know, pretty small place. And when I went away to college, the last thing I would have told you I was going to do was go back home and live in Lynchburg. But almost 30 years later, look what happened. But anyway, I'm a chemist by education and started working at the distillery part-time when I was still in college. And that's when I kind of got the idea, I was studying chemistry and I thought, well, whiskey would be pretty cool. And, back when I was in college, this would have been probably 2001, the internet was still connected to the phone and all that good stuff, if you remember. And I remember sitting with some friends of mine and, we were, maybe at Friday night, maybe it was a Saturday night, maybe we had a drink in our hand and they're like, oh, let's go to jackdaniels.com. And they did. And they rolled up a picture of my grandfather. And I was like, oh, well, that's Papa right there. They're like, what do you mean? And so I thought, well, yeah, maybe chemistry and whiskey, I could do this. And so I started working at the distillery. A couple years later, finished with school. I spent 11 years in Kentucky. So I honestly do love Kentucky, right? And I love great Kentucky bourbon. I really do. I'm not lying. But I worked with Brown-Forman for 9 years in R&D up there as a chemist, doing a lot of different things with all of our different distilleries. Obviously, Jack Daniel's is the largest brand at Brown-Forman. Those of you familiar with Brown-Forman, I'm going to assume, I know this is a pretty well-versed crowd. And so I had a great time there. After that, I went to another producer in Kentucky for a couple of years, had a great time as their chemist there. And then I got a call from Jeff Arnett, a great friend of mine still to this day. And he said, hey, I need some help in Lynchburg. And sounded pretty good to me to move back home to work for him and to be in the specific role in the distillery as assistant master distiller. I just had to convince my wife to move to Lynchburg. But we're very happy to be there, be back home for me, of course. And I've been now in this role as master distiller since October 1st, 2020. So we'll be 5 years this October. And it's a special thing for me to be literally in the same office that my granddad was in. They saved his old office for me and even his old desk that I sit at every single day. It's really, really cool. It's fun. It really is. Yeah. Funny story, about 4 or 5 years ago, we renovated the whole office and everybody was buying new office furniture. And they came to me and said, well, Chris, you need to put your order in. You want a new desk and new shelves and all this stuff. I said, no, I'm going to stick with my old one. Let's keep what I got. So it's a very special thing to be in my granddad's office and to have had him. And he was obviously a bigger influence on my life than I even knew as a young person. He and I were the only two chemists in the family. So I guess really more than I even expected until I got into this role. So the most important thing to me is to be able to say we make whiskey the same way my granddad made it. And he started working at the distillery on January 2nd, 1957. Yes, the brand was very, very different than it is now. We make a lot more whiskey than my granddad made in 1957, but that's good for all of us in this room. But I promise we make it the same way. And that's, to be able to share with you tonight whiskeys, at least with a 14-year-old whiskey, a style of Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey that has not been tasted other than a handful of people that have been to the distillery in the last couple months. Nobody on this planet has tasted a 14-year-old Jack Daniel's whiskey since the early 1900s. So 120 years ago, yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a fun night, and the whiskey is exceptional. It's spectacular. It's this project that we started with 10, 12, and 14-year-old has been near and dear to my heart. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. For those of you that don't know, Jack Daniel had age-stated marks on his Tennessee whiskey back in his day. He did a 10, a 12, a 14, also an 18, and a 21-year-old age-stated. We're working, Grease. We're working. Exactly. Yes, we are. Yeah, if I could only go back to 2003 and make more whiskey, that would be great, but I can't. Unfortunately, I'm not nearly that good. So the goal is to recreate the same marks that Jack did and hopefully put a product in the bottle that he would be proud of today and that my granddad would be proud of today if they were here. And so that's, of all the things that we've done, and I know we're going to talk more about innovation and different things that we've done in the last few years. And I love to talk about it. And if anybody has any questions, I think we're going to do some Q&A later on too. I want you guys to know anything you want to know. There are no secrets, total transparency. That's what I'm all about. I want you to know everything we do to make Jack Daniels. I know not everybody's going to say Jack Daniels is their favorite whiskey, right? Everybody has different palates. But I do think the more you know about how we make our whiskey, the more people will appreciate it. So there are no secrets here. Let's talk a bit about what's in your glass, though, because I'm just running my mouth, and you guys have great whiskey in your hand. This starts, everything that we're tasting tonight is classic Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey. That's where it starts. We've done so many cool things in the last few years, and everybody has just, really responded better than I would have ever even imagined, to be honest, whether it be with this 10-year-old, hopefully what will be coming with our 14-year-old, some of our single barrel releases, something like a Coy Hill release comes to mind. Every bit of that is Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey. These very barrels that we're going to taste, now obviously we don't age Old No. 7 to 10 years, but every barrel that went into that Coy Hill special release that we released back in August, it would have gone right into Old No. 7. Every single drop of that would have gone into Old No. 7. So to think about the recognition and, the awards and all this acclaim that these whiskeys are getting, it's still based on 80% corn, 12% malted barley, 8% rye. Right? Still the same recipe. When my granddad was there and there was only 8 fermenters and the brand was only sold in the Southeast in the 1950s, pretty much, some guy named Frank Sinatra started calling it Nectar of the Gods, and here we go. Thankfully, God bless him. And so to think about that recipe that Jack got right way back in the day is still garnering the attention and winning the awards that it's getting now. It's really, really amazing to think about that. So Tennessee whiskey, like I said, 80 corn, 12 malt, 8 rye. Just real quick through the process. I don't want to bore anybody, but if you do have questions, like I say, we will have Q&A later, I was promised, and I want you to ask all the questions that you have. The big thing about us, the 12% malted barley is what's in that grain bill to break down the starches in the grain into sugars. Sugars have to be formed in order to ferment. If you cannot ferment, you're not making any whiskey or beer or wine or whatever spirit there is out there, right? And so that's a really big thing for us. At least 12% malted barley in every grain bill we make. Our yeast that's fermenting that, a lot of people smell, especially not as much with 10 and 12 and 14, but like an Old No. 7, you smell that big fruity aroma in Jack Daniel's, apricot, banana, pear, apple peel sometimes. Those esters are really laid down by the yeast in the fermentation. Our fermentations go very slow and long, 6 to 7 days long. That's going to allow that yeast to really create those flavors in the whiskey, right? The yeast can be very flavor impactful if you allow it. So the yeast is really, really critical. We have our own microbiologist on staff. You guys have been to the lab, right? You've seen it yourself, the very thing that makes our product, our yeast. So super, super critical. We can date that yeast strain, the mother strain, back to Prohibition, 1938. Same yeast my granddad used, yes. Have a full-time microbiologist on our staff. She's growing our yeast up every week with her own hands. Have a person that does this, right? And she brings it in every week, inoculates it into the distillery for our fermentation. Distillation comes next, right? All of our stills, 100% copper. It's a double distillation process. First, it goes to a column, then it goes through a pot still, right? And then, of course, after we distill that whiskey out of the fermented mash or the beer, it's going to go through the charcoal, right? Charcoal mellowing, which, and we can talk about this later too, does not prevent us from labeling as bourbon whiskey, but allows us to label as Tennessee whiskey, right? Okay, so it does not prevent Tennessee whiskey from being bourbon. Yes, Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. It's a fact. It's not a big deal. Doesn't bother me a bit, okay? I know. We got that out of the way? All right. So after the mellowing process, the whiskey is still clear as water, right? Still, there's a lot of flavor there. Those sweet, fruity notes that you get from fermentation are in there, but it's going to go in that barrel to age. So obviously, what you have in your glass has been sitting for 10 years. This is batch 4, right? 4 years now of batching 10-year-old Tennessee whiskey. When we released this, then 4 years ago, this was the first age-stated Jack Daniel's period, as far as, you know, the classic old age statements that were on there since the early 1900s. There might have been a few things that popped up post-Prohibition that could have had some shorter age statements on it, 7, 8 years. And we used to do some corn whiskeys and some different quirky things right after Prohibition. But what we set out to do, even the design of the label, we had an artist draw the cartouche around the number, around the 10 and the 12 and the 14. It's not a replica. Thank you, sir. I've got one right here, too. I do. Perfect. Never hurts to have more than one bottle. But the cartouche in the center, I take no credit over any packaging ever. But that is sort of a replica-ish of the old cartouche that was around the number that Jack was using back in the day, around that label in the early 1900s. And so this is about recreating and honoring our past. Right? This is absolutely not about trying to do something because somebody else in the industry is doing it now. No. It's about doing something because this is part of our history. Jack Daniel was selling 21-year-old age-stated whiskey before a lot of the age-stated whiskey brands out there now were even in existence, right, in the early 1900s. So this is all about honoring Jack and taking that same 80% corn, 12% malt, and 8% rye, and doing something just a little bit different with it to drive new and different flavors in there that haven't been experienced in that long. So go ahead. I'm going to nose it first. And this is at 97 proof. A lot of people have asked me about 97 proof, and the thought for this was when we started this product, we held back some single barrels. Single barrels are in the upper floors. All right. Maybe not the absolute top of a barrel house, but pretty close if not. And after about 8 years on the top floor, we moved them all down. And we continue to do that with every age-stated expression that we do. When it gets around 8 years old, we want to move it down to a lower floor. And so 97 proof is very near the 94 proof that we do our single barrel product at. And the thought was to allow our friends to gather and enjoy a whiskey and keep it somewhat close to a single barrel select as far as the ABV or the proof goes, right? And to allow you to experience, okay, if single barrel is around 6 years, give or take, 5 to 7 on average, but around 6 years old, what would an additional 4-year aging cycle do to that? And then you can have that nice comparison and ladder your way through the Jack Daniel's lineup from single barrel select now to our 10-year-old at 97 proof. So go ahead and jump in, take a sip. Personally, for me, I'm a sucker for anything between 90 and 100, or maybe 110. That's just, there's a lot of flavor there. It is so easy to sip on neat, just like this. It doesn't even need a cube or a drop of water, in my opinion. And so that was the thought process behind 97 proof, and why we got it there, was to create this natural ladder through our products. And as we get to 12 and then 14 and beyond, we'll see where we go with the proof and what Mother Nature gives us when it comes out of the barrel. And of course, we have to feel good about what proof we're going to put it in the bottle at. So, but we have an idea of where we might go in the future, at least we think. So as long as Mother Nature doesn't throw any curveballs, we'll see what happens. But I hope you all enjoy the 10-year-old. Good? Batch 4? All right. Grease, are you next or Will?
Yeah, I think I'm next. I'm just, check my.
Well, I'm just going to have another drink.
Oh, is it? Yep. Nope. How's the 10? Good. Well, we're going to move to the 12. So the 12 is ready for you guys over here, so you guys can make your way over to this area. It's going to be a couple minutes because we've got some fun, and be quiet too if you can, because we're going to have some fun questions with Chris here. Some questions that you guys probably have never had the courage to ask him. Okay? Even on social media behind your handles. Okay, this is going to be legit. Oh, I just had Donnie in there. Okay. All right, question number 1. What's the craziest whiskey experiment you thought about trying?
Craziest whiskey experiment thought about trying. I'm probably not the most creative guy in the world. I mean, we're sitting here talking about a product that was done 120 years ago.
Yeah. You just ignited an old flame.
But yeah, exactly, yeah. But I spent 9 years in R&D, and I think it was really interesting. I started in 2003, during a time where bourbon whiskey, American whiskey, was not nearly what it is now. But within our company, we're very, very proud of doing everything ourselves, right? And at the time, we were even making barrels. We had 2 cooperages, we had multiple stave mills. We were very involved in the barrel making process. And one of the things, and it really wasn't, my idea, but it was a project that I did work on, and that was an inside-out barrel. And
okay, did y'all hear that? You daggum right. I have no idea what that means, but I peed a little bit when he said it. Go ahead, Chris.
So as we all know, Tennessee whiskey, bourbon whiskey, has to be aged in a new charred oak barrel. Right. So if any of you have ever been to a cooperage, the staves come in, right? A cooper will put the staves together on hoops, right? And then it'll be, our barrels are toasted, slowly heated first, then charred fairly quickly, right? And then sent to the distillery and filled. Well, the outside of that oak, and I don't know if it looks kind of like oak. It's still blonde, new oak, right? It hasn't been exposed to the toasting or the char process. The outside, the exterior of that barrel. And so the thought was, once we age the whiskey fully in it, 4, 5, 6 years old, whatever, dump it out. If we brought it back to the cooperage and put it back into a steam chamber to where we could bend those staves back the other way, right? And you would have to cut, the staves again, right, to make a new joint, right? And so this is
the most complicated answer to this question.
No.
I'm just kidding, Chris. Go
you
ahead.
asked what an inside-out barrel was, so I'm telling you, that's.
I love it. No, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sarah's pissed at me. Go ahead.
So anyway, you flip the barrel inside out. Then you retoast and rechar the inside, which was on the outside.
I would love to have that.
Doesn't work, though. It doesn't? No.
All right, tell us how you know that. Because it sounds awesome.
Because it leaked like hell. Yes.
Okay, speaking of leaking, I don't know if you guys have seen our video of when Chris just shocked and awed us with like, hey, we're going to taste this 14-year-old barrel straight out of the barrel. But in the shot of that video, there's this massive crack around the bunghole. I think a lot of people... Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. Okay, I try to use bunghole around Chris as much as I can. Okay? All right. No, so how do you save that barrel? Like, what do you guys do if it's got a huge crack in it and you're going to age it up to possibly 18, you said?
Oh, yeah, that's the goal, is to get it to 18, 100%. We don't know exactly what we can do because that was on the bung stave. So it's not, at this point, very feasible to replace that. What will happen is it'll go back into a rick. It will be bung up, right? So you never want a barrel to be bunged down. So when a cooper makes a barrel, the first stave that he pulls is the bung stave. And so it's going to be the widest stave. So it has to be, about at least 3 inches wide. So it's got to be, he knows he's got at least one in there that's wide enough to drill a bung through. And so that one was cracked right on top. You could obviously see it. Most likely the crack didn't really go all the way through. And just over the years, it probably sealed itself, I would say. And there was still a pretty good amount of whiskey in that barrel for a 14-year-old barrel.
In fact, you said there was more whiskey in that barrel than the typical 14s that you pulled out this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was kind of one of the reasons why, we're going to keep aging this up because the Angels aren't pissed off about this one.
Let's hope not.
Yeah. All right. So that was one question out of 20 that I have. And I am going to wrap it up at that one question. So Chris, and we're going to come back to this when we go to the 14 here in a minute. But Chris is going to talk to you guys about the 12 here. And I'll pop back up in here and maybe we'll have some more questions.
I think
Thank you, Chris.
Min Lee confiscated my 12-year-old sample. I'm going to call him. There he is.
Oh, dude, that's
he poured me another one. Thank you,
That's a healthy one.
That is a healthy one.
Thanks, Chris. I'll be back.
Keep feeding me this. The questions and the answers are going to go longer and longer. Wow. Okay, so from batch 4, a 10-year-old, now to batch 3, a 12-year-old. This one to me at 107 proof, and we didn't really know where we wanted to land on proof for the 12-year-old and how it would play out. We did think, or at least I felt pretty strongly, that as we worked our way up in age, I wanted the proof to go up a little bit because, you know, the higher the proof, it's going to retain a little bit of natural sweetness anyway, just from the spirit, from the whiskey itself. And so obviously the biggest thing that we're worried about is over oaking. So far, so good. I couldn't be more pleased, honestly, than what we've gone through now through really all 4 batches of the 10. I mean, some are going to finish off a little drier than others. That's just going to happen. You're going to see that, and you're going to see that variation all through each batch. And that's why we put a batch number on every one of them. So you'll know batch to batch what kind of variability there is. It won't be as variable as a single barrel product, obviously, because these are batch. Usually a couple hundred barrels, but between 200 and 300 each time we've dumped these. The yield gets worse and worse, obviously, the older we get, and it does exponentially get worse because as that liquid level evaporates down through the barrel, you actually start losing it at a higher rate because it's exposed to more air. But the 12-year-old at 107 proof, you know, I said earlier between 90 and 100 or 110 is where I love it. 107, it's got a lot of historic kind of classic premium whiskey cues to it. Some distillers, you know, use that as an entry proof way back in the day. I remember one time I asked my granddad about entry proof, and you know, I've since kind of formed my own opinions on entry proof. But a lot of people, I don't know if you've ever asked anybody about entry proof, what the whiskey goes into the barrel at. And ultimately, it depends on what kind of barrel you have and what you're trying to get out of it and how long you want to leave it in there. But it's not just lower is always better, for sure. Absolutely not. Sometimes higher is much, much better, depending on where you're trying to get. But I remember asking my granddad about it one day, and he said, well, you got to remember, way back in the day, if they could get something to 107 or 110 proof off the still, they were lucky. I mean, think about making on an old pot still on a farm with no roof over your head. You know, if it rains, guess what? Well, it's going in, you know? So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So anyway, 107, of course, we are kind of partial to the number 7. But I think it's a beautiful point of proof to balance the 12 years that this has had in the barrel. You know, to me, the 12-year-old has a marked difference from the 10. I don't want to tip my hand on the 14 coming later. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But the 107 proof, I think, is perfect because it kind of adds to that marked difference. You know, if you pour the 10 and then the 12 and you're tasting them side by side right now, clearly there's a difference there, and that's what we wanted. So for me, I mean, there's just more richness in the 12. There's a deeper caramelized oak, caramelized sugar, dark, almost burnt brown sugar that's going on there. Go ahead and jump in and take a sip. And please compare side by side if you have some of your 10-year-old left. That's what this is all about. And for me, the candied spice notes, I get candied, almost like peppermint candy. There's chocolate notes that go on in the 12-year-old. It just builds and builds. There's baking spices, cinnamon, almost like baking cookies. You know, there's a little bit of a chewy tobacco on the back end as well. So, you know, I just absolutely love where we're at with the 12. When we started this, and I thought the goal is going to be to recreate all of our marks, obviously the 14-year-old hopefully is going to end up in the center of the whole lineup when we get there. And I thought, well, I wonder if people will just gravitate to that 14 because it is kind of the midpoint in the lineup. But after 3 batches of the 12, I don't know. It might be right here in my hand. The 12-year-old is so good. And again, I think that 107 proof really is a perfect mark for it. So what do you think? Nice. Very good. I think this falls. The first batch of the 12 for me was so creamy and rich. Butterscotchy, molasses. The second batch of 12 was much drier. A little bit spicier on the back end, more oak forward, clearly. This one falls somewhere right back in the middle of those two. So there's a really nice tension for me of those kind of dry baking spices and those kind of chocolatey, candied notes as well. So I love the way that tug of war that the flavor has with batch 3 of 12. Cheers, everybody. Grease, you've got 19 questions left, right?
Well, I was just enjoying that,
Are these one-word answers that I have to give? Or?
Yeah, I mean, dude, let me go. I just told men back there, I said,
Before he answers that question, Grease has never asked someone a question and expected more than one word. So he thought he had to get 20 words out of you by writing 20 questions.
okay, well, well, the inside out barrel, I appreciate you telling me about that. And
It's the first thing that popped in my head. So
anyway, that was great. I just want you to know, that I've been back there.
You Googled inside out barrel? No?
No, I've had access to the whole bottle lineup. Okay, so if you weren't a master distiller, which that would be a shame and I would be pissed off about, but what would you be doing? And you can't say I'd be like a biologist. You can't say that. You got to say race car driver or something.
Race car driver.
What is wrong with this thing?
So is it what would I want to be?
Yeah. What would you do?
Musician. No doubt. Oh, yeah. I'm just not talented enough.
What do you play?
Well, that's debatable.
Well,
but
all right. What do you enjoy yourself playing?
Guitar.
Okay.
Little mandolin.
We know like a G chord, or what are we talking about? We talking about?
No. There's not enough 14-year-old whiskey in this world. We've got a professional. We've got professionals in the
Trevor,
house.
we might need to fire it up over here. The little thing about free bird, man, free bird. All right. If you had to describe, you had to describe your job as a movie title, what would it be?
Oh, as a movie title.
Do you want to know what mine would be for you?
Yeah, that'd be good.
If I was answering your question, because
just
let's
wanna
be
know.
honest, I want to take over. Okay. Days of Thunder. Ooh. Dude, he felt me. Oh, like Gone with the Wind? Like that Gone with the Wind doesn't make sense in this case.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Gosh.
What's the movie title?
I don't.
My wife looked at me like, you better lock that shit up, buddy.
First thing that popped in my head was Jurassic Park. I don't know why.
Heck
but
yes! Heck yes!
I don't know.
Heck yes. So if you had to just... Oh, by the way, we have the 14-year over here ready for you guys. So if y'all could just be a little quiet and go over there and saunter and get it, that would be great. What is the strangest thing you've signed for whiskey fans? Because there's some people here tonight that want to sign bottles. I've totally told everybody like we're not doing any thing questionable.
No questionable acts of signing. No.
I mean, if somebody asks you to sign their baby.
No babies. No
Okay.
babies. I've signed cars, motorcycles, golf balls. Kind of strange. I signed like a little, like in the groceries for senior citizens to drive around on, like those little, what do you call them? Like a little rascal,
Oh, a little scooter.
Scooter, yeah, scooters.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
awesome.
Tires.
So is that their way of drinking and driving?
I don't know.
Is that their, okay.
I don't know.
All right. Is there a crazy whiskey you want to release, but you know the world isn't ready for it?
Oh, no. I mean, I think, no, man. I'm probably not that creative, and there's so many things in Lynchburg because we've been so focused on the classics, the old number sevens, the Gentleman Jacks, and the consistency. There's so many things that we do classically well that people are just now discovering. And so that's really where my focus is. Age statements, really unique things that we can do as single barrels, really awesome. You know, we've had hazmats, we've had different high proofs. We're going to continue to do that. Now, we will get into some other stuff too, different grains and things like that. It's all aging and it's all coming. It's just a little bit young yet, but we'll get there, but nothing too crazy.
Okay, well, there's another question I have to ask after this one. Sorry, Will, it's going to go a little over just 60 seconds. Is there a crazy whiskey you want to... Oh, nope, sorry. What's your go-to karaoke song, and how much whiskey was needed before performing it?
There is no go-to karaoke song. If I could sing at all, I would be a musician, not a distiller. So we've covered that one already.
So even if you're like half a handle in, there's no karaoke song you would do.
Man, probably some Eric Church song or something.
Oh,
like
hell
that.
yeah. Okay. All right. I like that. All right. And the last question on this session, I guess we'll circle back because we've got 5,000 more questions. Where is it? Oh, is it true that you are best friends with Grease?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Christmas card list.
I'm pretty offended that that's your one question you gave a 2-word damn answer to. Okay, there's no media training sucks. Okay, so I do have one more really quick. Where is it? Oh, if someone were to impress you, let's just say I come over to the house. Okay, and I'm like...
Does Ashley know?
Well, I mean, Ashley...
That's my wife, by the way.
Ashley was amazing. Ashley actually gave Will and I our first tour, which is Chris's wife. And it was so... I was like, why do we have the master distiller's wife on our tour? This is so weird. And then, fast forward later, we're trying a 14-year-old out of a barrel a month before it's released. Anyway, the Lord's with us. That's all. That's all I'm going to say. What was the question? I apologize. You're right. You know what? It's a great time to wrap that up. Chris Fletcher, why don't you tell us about that 14-year-old?
All right. Well, I do want a little water before the 14. So we have laddered our way up 10, 12, and now 14. We've gone from 97 to 107 to now 126 proof. Yeah. So now, on that note, as I've kind of talked through proof, we did not control this. This is right out of the barrel. We batched it. I think we ended up dumping 260 to 280 barrels, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yield was not wonderful, but what better thing to do than an event like tonight to get it in your all's hands? If I could send everybody a bottle of this, I would. That's what it's about. Yeah. The problem is, once it goes in a bottle, I got no control over it. I got nothing else to do with it. I'm done. So, but anyway, the 126, when this spent its first 8 years on the top floor somewhere, it was probably pushing 140, well into the 130s. And so it's starting to lose proof because we moved it down to a bottom floor into a barrel house, like I said earlier. And, we really decided at 14 years, 126, just on the nose alone, it's hard to argue with that. We'll see where the next few years takes this whiskey as it continues to go on, the ones that are left behind. But right now, I think, my gut tells me to kind of let Mother Nature do her thing. And we'll see what comes out of the barrel. So I doubt we really get to manipulating proof or adding any water to it. The other thing is, I didn't mention this about the other two, None of this is chill filtered. We don't really chill filter hardly anything at the distillery. There's a few things that we will do, but very little. So, 95%, 99% probably of anything from Jack Daniel's has not been chill filtered. So we don't really that aggressively filter our whiskey just in general. But this was even less. So it only goes through some filter pads. It really is just taking the sticks and stones out of the barrel itself. So, if you do want to add some water to it or a cube to it, you certainly can. As that water and that ice integrates, you're going to see it start to haze up, right? Because you're starting to change, the solubility of what is in this mixture. And one of the reasons is because it's so lightly filtered, right? So that's a very normal thing, and it's going to keep as much of the flavor into that whiskey as we can, and that's the whole goal. So go ahead and let's jump in. On the nose for me, I get dark molasses sweetness. I think I've described it a couple times as kind of molasses-covered tobacco on the palate. Go ahead and take a sip. Rich, creamy, really interesting, kind of almost a cherry fruit. And that kind of pops in and out sometimes with our single barrels and our higher proof stuff. That kind of interesting cherry note, that apple peel and apricot fruit turns into more of a cherry note at the higher proofs. But man, I'm going to go back again. So rich and viscous at 126 proof, all the way down. The texture of it, creamy. There's a great weight of viscosity to it. Plenty of barrel. After you kind of swallow, you kind of get the dry leather, kind of the burnished wood, all the layers of the spice of the oak that starts to come out. Couldn't really be happier, to tell you the truth, for the 14. I think it's an extremely special whiskey. Before we go back to any Q&A, I just want to say again, back to what Will said to kick us off, whiskey's about bringing people together, and my goodness, I do get to travel all over now for, the brand and different countries, different states. And, we need things to bring us together right now is what I see when I'm out there. And so if we can do it just a little bit with what we put into the bottle, that's what it's all about. And so I think this 14-year-old whiskey, first time in at least 120 years anybody has ever tasted 14-year-old Jack Daniel's. And to do it right here in Franklin, Tennessee, with you, with you all tonight, it's really, really special. This is a really special whiskey. I hope you all very much enjoy it. If you have any questions, hopefully we can get to those here in a minute as well. But these are three beautiful whiskeys, all somewhat different, but I think all stand on their own merit as well. So I couldn't be happier with what our team has done. And I know you guys are listening to me ramble tonight. You see my name on the bottles, but I can promise you there's a whole bunch of people back in Lynchburg that make this product what it is. And I get way too much credit. We've got the best people in the industry. Yeah, cheers to that. Yeah, raise a glass. That's right. And all the people that came before us making whiskey in Lynchburg as well, because this is all a part of them. We're still making it right there in Lynchburg, Tennessee. So cheers, everybody. Enjoy that 14.
All right, Will has given me 3 questions, Chris, out of the 20. He went through these and he was like, no, you will not ask him that. So, all right, so here in a second, what we're going to do, after these questions, we're going to kind of get you guys all together. We're going to take like a big little selfie picture or whatever. Then we're going to do the Q&A. What we're going to do is have you guys kind of come up kind of in this area over here. Will's going to kind of give you the mic. We're actually going to have you come up and ask a question. So if you don't want to be on camera, keep your questions to yourself. Okay? It was probably a garbage question like all of mine anyway. All right, have you... Okay, so Chris, I want you to picture this, okay? You're having a hard day at work. Things aren't coming in clear, okay? You're sitting there in a rick house all by yourself. You're looking at that barrel that you really need to show up. Have you ever had a heart-to-heart with a barrel? And if so, what did you say? Or what? Or even, I mean, that sounds like he was on the backside of 14-year pours, but yes. What did the barrel say back?
Yeah, I know people. You're gonna hate this answer. People think about, distillers and barrels, but I mean, the distiller distills. So once it goes into a barrel, I'm really not involved. Unless we're doing something like this, of course. And I am the, what you would call the product developer for all of these and our limited editions and things like that. But my team is about getting whiskey into the barrel. So if you take questionable whiskey and put it into a barrel, that's a lot to ask a barrel to make a questionable whiskey good. But if you start with good whiskey, clear spirit going in, that barrel's going to work. It's going to be great. It's just a matter of time. Some might take longer than others. So I guess really what I'm trying to say is it's what do I say to the stills?
I don't want to tell what I said to that barrel because it was a little risque.
Well, listen, I talk to the yeast, right? So maybe, is that better? Talk to the yeast?
You do. No, he does talk to the yeast. We were in there. Chris let us into the yeast lab, which was very questionable because I feel like that is the closest thing that I could come to messing up everything than I've ever been.
You were on camera. You just didn't know.
I 100%. And I just want everybody to know out there, I didn't touch it. Okay, so no, that was a really cool experience, by the way, with the yeast. Like Chris took us back in there and like he's showing us all like a cryo chamber refrigerator, and then they have a redundant thing somewhere else. They control that thing like crazy. It's unbelievable. What? I'm doing the second one because Will said so. All right, here we go. What has been your proudest moment while being master distiller at Jack Daniel's?
Oh, man, that's cool. A couple things popped in my head. One, so I was named master distiller October 1st, 2020. My granddad passed in January 2020, so it was just 10 months before that, he wasn't there. Of course, I like to think that he certainly knows and he's with me when I'm sitting in that office every day. But obviously 2020, that year needs no introduction. We all remember what was going on in 2020. And my wife and I had our first and only child, our son. So talk about a year, you lose a grandparent, you have a son, you have a worldwide pandemic going on, and you get, pretty much your dream job all in 1 year. So, that all adds up, I guess, in kind of a strange way. It's my proudest scenario. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, dude, that's I'd dive into that more on a therapy couch with you.
I feel like the questions are getting longer, but the answers are getting shorter. No? Right?
Yeah, it's fine because he got a text from Ashley that said, "Hurry the hell up." That's what happened. All right. One last question here before we do a little Q&A. Well, and the picture. We're going to get a picture here. What Jack Daniel's product would you pair with an apocalyptic scenario?
Oh, wow.
Like this is the one product that you could have. Like this is like a holy crap, we're all doomed. Let me grab this one bottle. That's what apocalypse means. Listen, dude. Our like our I can't say what I said. I just stopped me. I filtered, Will, but I was going to say something that you would not have approved of. Apocalypse.
It would have to be one of our single barrels. The single barrel for me, if I could, maybe have more than one bottle, or is it only one bottle?
No, well, okay,
only
Chris,
one barrel.
You can't have a caveat
we can argue that.
On an apocalypse.
Well,
okay,
you might have a couple bottles from a barrel and another barrel. A mixed,
I don't think
mixed
that's.
case.
I don't know if that works.
Carry a case in the apocalypse.
You could carry a case.
Oh yeah, you could get a case.
Okay, so Chris wants 6 bottles.
6 bottles.
Because you know what the currency is going to be in the apocalypse? Jack Daniels.
Could be.
That's going to be the only currency. And let me go ahead and tell you something. I am rich, baby. All right, what is it? What's the pour? the single barrels,
single
but
barrel
like
select,
barrel proof.
No,
94?
no, I want it right. I mean, barrel proof, I love, and certainly with something like this, it's all about this unique batch because, as we know, as we've seen with the 10s and the 12s, batch 2 of 14 year is going to be different than batch 1 of 14 year. It will be. And so for me, you know, we're so focused, hypersensitive on consistency, right? For things like Old Number 7, Gentleman Jack, you know, our bottle and bond things.
A granddad and grandson being master distiller. I totally get it.
Well, just
Keep it consistent.
The variation though that you get with our single barrel is what's fun. So that's what I would want, and you know, to have a little bit different, but 94 proof right out of the bottle. You know, I don't need a drop of water. I don't need a cube. You know, just I have to think that in the apocalypse you're not going to be, you know, doing long cocktail, you know, 10 ingredient type of thing. No, it's not my style anyway.
Okay. Yeah. I would go barrel proof just so everybody knows. I would, because I'd be like, I don't know what else to do with my hands. So I'm just going to, the zombies coming. All right. So we're going to do a quick picture. I will say this about Chris. He has a smile on his face at like 5 a.m. Like I went into his bedroom one time and I scared him a little bit and he still had a smile. It was really super weird. But anyway, this guy loves questions. He loves people. He loves whiskey. So if you guys have a question, just hit up with Will over here. He's going to kind of get you guys. And we just want you guys to come up on stage to ask that. So here's Will. I love you. I mean it. Bye. I love you.
All right, yeah, so once again, not mandatory, but I know a couple of y'all have some good questions for Chris that weren't covered in Grease's really well thought out, elaborate questions. But once again, Chris, we've gotten to know you over the past few years, and actually we met up with you while you were still assistant master distiller, and have just seen your passion for Jack Daniels that I think that Jack Daniels is lucky to have you because you're the best salesman for it, and that's not even your job to be the salesman. But it is such a remarkable thing to see your passion for the product, for the distillery, for the history and the legacy of it. But if anyone has a question, come right up here. I'll hold your hand. Come on up.
I love it. First.
Hi. Hi, my name's Tim.
Hey, Tim.
I have like a two-part question for you. The first is, you said you do things at Jack Daniel's much like they did in the 50s when your granddad did it. So I guess the question for me then, if nothing has changed, what do you do all day?
Right.
And,
Fair.
No, I mean, I'm generally curious, like what a master distiller does. And the second part to that is, I notice a lot of people that are in your role at other distilleries are also like chemical engineers. And I was wondering how your chemistry education plays into your role.
Yeah, really good. Well, first of all, hopefully I don't have to do anything during the day. No news is good news, but the distillery operations team reports under me, so that would be about, in total, maybe 75 or 80 people. And so, you know, the distillery every day is going to receive around 1.8 million pounds of grain. We'll turn that to 150,000 gallons of whiskey. So we're going to fill a good full day for us, up to 2,000 barrels in one day. So that's moving it, man. That's 35 trucks pretty much running in there every single day. A lot of moving parts. I mean, there's 6 sets of stills. 12 stills total, 6 columns and 6 pots. So taking that, grain, water, yeast, and making the spirit, while we want to make it always the same, obviously there is subtle variation, right? And then the second thing is, too, especially when you think about it, this whiskey only has a few things that add flavor. The grains, the wood of the barrel, the yeast, right? You could say the water, right? But that's not really adding flavor, so to speak. So it's about taking that and, some years you might have a really bad drought, in the high plains in Montana, and the barley quality is just terrible. And when they go in and harvest that in August, guess what? That's the same barley we're going to have to use from August until the next August. And so there's things that you have to do and manage day in and day out that is all about consistency. Now, obviously, with things like this, we want to start peeling back the layers a little bit and allowing the nuances to come through. That's the whole point of doing experimental things or recreating products from our past. So I wish it was as easy as pressing cruise control and rolling down the interstate, but it's not quite that. But again, those 75 men and women that make our whiskey what it is, and we're making whiskey right now. You know, we should have about 3 stills running right now as we speak. So anyway, and the chemistry side of it, it helps for sure, but you don't really learn distilling in college. You know, there may be other places you can learn it. I don't know. I won't mention that.
I went to school in Alabama, so I think we'll learn a little thing or two about distilling.
It helps, right? I mean, having a science or engineering background certainly does help, for sure. And I think the term master distiller, the role master distiller, is different now than it was even in my granddad's time. You know, my granddad would have never been at an event like this and, you know, talked about the whiskey. He was on call 24/7, 365. And my mom would talk about when she was a little girl on Christmas morning, you know, my granddad would go in at 4:30 a.m. every morning to the still house and then come home at like 7 when my mom and her sister would wake up and, you know, open presents on Christmas Day and then go back to the still house and finish the day. So thankfully, you know, that the role has changed a little bit since then. But that was back in the day when Old Number 7 was completely allocated. You know, Old Number 7 was allocated until almost 1980. You stop and think about that. That's unbelievable. Walk into a bar in Chicago in 1979 and try to order Jack Daniels, and guys like, man, I wish I could get my hands on some. You know, and so it was just incredible the growth that happened during his tenure for sure. So.
Anyone else with a question? Sim, come on up. Brandon, you're after Sim. And one thing I do want to say, when we were fortunate to go on, once again, the first time I've ever had this happen in our 9 years of doing media around whiskey, but the master distiller took us on a tour of the distillery just a few weeks ago, back in January. And I've talked about your passion that I've seen for Jack Daniels and the product you make, but I mean, I've never seen the grain mill room, and I've never seen the yeast lab, and being able to see those things and see the way you think about it was fascinating, and that is not something you see every day, but it was evident your passion behind it. But even just the granular things about how much care you take with your product, about with the charcoal filtering, when the grains are blown across to the room where they're going to be used in the mash, and the slight pickup of oil that could go with that could add to a negative flavoring, that they are thinking on such a minute scale of making sure that it is the best you can make every day you make it. And that is very evident when you go on a tour with the master distiller himself, that they are paying attention to every single detail every single day. So I like that. I liked seeing that. And now we'll go to Sim.
Hey, Chris. Thank you for coming in. I went to the Squire House for the first time today ever. Angelo says hello.
All right.
And my question is, Coy Hill, lightning in a bottle. Absolutely magic juice. I've never had a bottle better, honestly. This is definitely vying for it. My question is, how many lightning in a bottles or unexpected accidents, happy accidents, whatnot, are you going to keep coming up with? Because I can't keep up.
Well, I'll say this. What's the best way to say it? It's really not an accident. I mean, I'm not. Again, our team. I know as long as we're giving them good ingredients. As long as the corn didn't look like black-eyed peas, we're going to make good whiskey. And so that's what I mean by no accidents. I mean, our team and our whiskey makers and our process. I mean, you have to think about Lynchburg in a little bit of a way of, my family history, but literally like 2/3 of like 60 to 70% of our employees are related to another employee. And that generational, perspective that we have with our product, I mean, it is very normal for people to be in jobs that their mom or aunt and uncle or whoever. I mean, my sister is our engineering manager at the distillery. I've got cousins working at the distillery. So when you have a team like that, creating whiskey and being able to dig into different parts and processes into our whiskey, I'm not going to say it's easy, but there's a certain level of confidence when you want to start peeling back the layers, as I said earlier. And the other thing is, too, back in my granddad's day, almost his entire career, Old Number 7 was allocated. So they did everything to batch together for consistent flavor. They never, ever would have even dreamed to do something like this, right? It just wasn't in the cards. And so there are so many. We have 97 barrel houses. 97. You know, so Coy Hill, you mentioned, like I said, every one of those barrels, it had, 7 or 8 years ago, every Coy Hill barrel would have gone right into a bottle of Old Number 7, right out the door. No big deal. So there are so many unique, 3 completely different tracts of land that we have barrel houses on. And so, Coy Hill was just kind of the first one. We had held some barrels back, really for a different project that we were thinking about doing. That fell through. And we just kind of left them up there and went back and sampled them and thought, wow, that's pretty good. We'll keep our eye on it. Honestly, kind of didn't think about it again for almost another year. And then we went back in there and we're seeing proofs 155, 157, 159. It's like, holy smokes. Like, I didn't even know that was possible, to be honest. I'd never seen it like that. And I've done a lot of, high foolproof bourbon and stuff in my career. So, it's not just Coy Hill, though. We've got right below it Tanyard Hill. We've got Slop Hill, or where our boiler is, Boiler Hill, if you want to call it that. We've got Track 3, which kind of runs back down towards Lincoln County in the western part of the county. So there's so many different things and nuances that we're just really discovering right now, in a lot of ways. Because in the past, the past 80 years, it's all been, how do we take these different pieces and make it the same? And now we're just kind of reverse engineering it. And that's where some of these, special products have come from. And there's going to be a lot more coming. I'm telling you, 2025 is going to be a fun year. There's some good stuff coming.
Brandon.
First of all, thanks for being here. This is awesome. Actually, Jack Daniel's is really special to me because it's where me and my wife, Kate, had our second date. So we went on a distillery tour our second day there. So I've always been a fan, but it was really cool. I was like, hey, you want to go on a tour to Jack Daniel's? She's like, sure. And then I was like, okay. And then we got married and here we are.
Proposed on the spot then.
Yeah,
right?
we should have probably. But my question is actually about the rye. Because I know we're not talking about that a lot, but the rye is one of my favorite. I just had a chance to go up in September and pick a single barrel of the rye, and it's fantastic. And I would just love to know, what plans are for rye moving forward. Are you planning on doing any sort of age statement on the rye? I know you're doing the single barrels. I think the one we picked was around the 6 or 7 year range. But yeah, I would just love to know what you have in store for rye, because I'm a huge rye fan as well, and I'm sure a lot of people here are too. Yeah. So I would just love to know what the plans are in the future for that, if you can share them, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think our rye is the hidden gem in American whiskey. I love the balance of our rye. It's 70% rye, again 12% malted barley. Remember, you got to have that malt in there, and then 18% corn. So there's a big slug of rye there, right? But then there's also that kind of natural, sweet, kind of fruity character that our yeast provides it. And so, just right off the still before the barrel, it's pretty incredible, the balance of flavor that's already there in that spirit. And so I agree. And our rye whiskey continues to win awards, and especially the barrel-proof single barrels are, it is... I've kind of said this before, the rye right now, it's a little bit older than the Tennessee whiskey counterpart. So it would have been 7, maybe even 8 years old on single barrel right now. So about 12 to 18 months older than the Tennessee whiskey counterpart, which is what we've kind of learned we like. But you will continue to see us innovate with rye. I think our bottle and bond rye, our bonded rye, is absolutely the best classic cocktail American whiskey out there. If you an old fashioned with that That's an 8-year-old bottle and bond rye. A little twist of citrus on top of that just makes it pop, and it is so good. So I think our rye whiskey at Jack Daniel's is kind of like the popularity of the Old Number 7, and people just don't realize we make the rye. Is sort of a secret in some ways, but we will continue to innovate. I will say our special release for our single barrel this coming year, 2025, it will be a rye whiskey, and it is special. It really is special. So, yeah, we look forward to that.
Anyone else have a question for Chris? All right, we've got a couple more. We got one over there for sure, and you're next. Yeah, you come first. But I do want to reiterate something that you may have not caught, because we actually learned this when we were down at the distillery. The bottled and bond rye. Did you hear how old he said that is? 8 years old. You see a bonded rye, you think, okay, it's at least got to be 4. And then you think, okay, maybe it's 6. No, they have an 8-year bonded rye, not age stated, but that's how long they know it needs to be. You also know bonded single season, so it's 8-year whiskey. They're not throwing some younger juice in there. That is arguably the best bargain on the market. The fact you can go get a liter for like $30 of the bonded rye, extremely versatile, cocktail, neat, however you want to drink it. I mean, that is, when a lot of things are going up in price, the fact you can get something 8 years bonded, one of the greatest products out there. I think that's a hidden gem, as you mentioned. I just want to get that out there, because when you said it, I was like, that is something a lot of people know.
We're going to hire Will in our sales department, I think.
I'll send you my terms. I'll send you my terms and conditions.
Got that resume dusted off?
Hey, Chris. Thank you very much for doing this. You've mentioned that your grandfather was master distiller. Are there any of his, not enough to sell, but have you tracked down, is there still one of his barrels? I know they'd be pushing 40 years, if not 50 or 60, depending on when in his tenure. Is there a corner of some warehouse that there's a grandpa's barrel that you've found?
No.
One word answer for you.
It's a good question, though.
I wish there was. But there wouldn't be any whiskey left in it at that point. I'll tell you, even at 14 and what we've done to move them and put them down the bottom floor, it's over 50% loss at 14, well over. So, in fact, we get about, I think the average out of the 14-year-old dump was maybe 9 cases is what we got per barrel. So not much. So, yeah, unfortunately, a 40-year-old barrel would be great. Now, I will say I do have a couple bottles, and I don't collect whiskey. Whiskey, we're doing what's meant to be done with whiskey. That's enjoy it with people and your friends and family. But I had a friend, if I can tell a story for 2-3 minutes here. Good friend of mine up in the Boston area owns a liquor store. And I happened to be in Boston one day, and our person there on our team in Boston said, "Hey, I want you to come meet this person that runs his family store." And came in and shook his hand, and he had, I guess he had heard about my granddad, and it was his grandfather that started that liquor store. So he was in his granddad's business too, and it kind of struck a chord with him. We shared a drink, a single barrel or something in the office or whatever it was in the back of the store, and a few weeks later, I got an email. He said, "Hey, I got something I'm going to send you." So okay, that's great, thank you, and it came in a box in the mail. I open it up, and it's a bottle of Old Number 7 from like 1965. So, yeah, sealed, perfect, mint condition. Beautiful. And he wrote this letter, and he said, "Hey, it's really special for me to be, in my family business. And, when I learned about your granddad and I found this bottle, I wanted you to have it." And he said, "I have one condition. You cannot just take this bottle and put it up on your shelf. You have to open it up and enjoy it with your granddad." This was back before he passed. So, and this was in the fall, maybe October. And so Thanksgiving that year, the whole family kind of gathered around. We opened that bottle and poured it all for everybody, and my granddad included. So there's no grandpa's barrels, but there's a couple grandpa's bottles out there. And so those are fun. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
All right, we probably have time for about 2 more questions. So we've got, I know one was over here, or someone over here, and then I got you, Tarak.
I got one really quick question.
That does not count.
Do you?
My two.
I know it doesn't. Does Jack Daniel's do anything with lower temp aging, like for long, like 50-year stuff? Like, because I know like a lot of people, I think it's 45 degrees is kind of like the benchmark as far as like what kind of goes into a barrel and what doesn't. Is there anything that you guys are doing as far as like prolonging age at lower temperatures?
No, we don't. We don't manipulate temperature. I mean, the things that we will do, in the summer when it gets so hot, we also want airflow, and so we will open up. There's vents and windows that we open in the summer to get that good airflow through there. Yes, you're right. Once it gets down below a certain temperature, you're just going to lose the pressure. Right? Alcohol responds to heat and expands very quickly. And so you can build up pressure within that barrel really, really fast when it gets warm. So, yeah, if you're, above 40, 50 degrees, you're probably still building up a little pressure and you're working into the wood. Much below that, you're probably not doing that much. We've experimented with heating and cycling houses for years. I mean, in the early 60s, mid 60s, they were putting insulation up in houses and heating them and cycling, but all that's been torn out. We've never thought it was enough of a benefit to do it. So yes, you can drive more extraction, but extraction's only one part of aging whiskey, right? So it's not the heat. Yes, will drive more oak into the liquid physically, but you also need to have oxidation and reduction reactions and all these things that are occurring in the liquid itself as well as you go. And so you can't really speed that up or fake it, or else you could just take wood chips and just soak it in there and crank it up to 100 degrees and have it out in a year. It's going to taste like crap. It's just not going to work. We've done it. We were doing it 50, 60, 70 years ago. We were doing inside-out barrels 30 years ago. I mean, if it's been done, I think
I hate that that's a thing now. That's
well, I mean, watch it. You'll see somebody will have an inside-out barrel whiskey on the market in a year. But
Reese has already bought 2 cases of it. Don't worry.
Well, there's so many things out there now that are marketed. That were done years and years and years ago. Different kinds of toasting and charring and different, all of these things now, because of the popularity of American whiskey in the last 15 years, there's a market for spinning American whiskey a little bit different now. In the 1970s and 60s, when we were doing all this experimentation, there was no market for it, right? It was just our R&D teams that were doing that, and it's awesome to have that history and those old papers to go back and look at and think about. And, some of them do work out, the groove barrels that we can use. So we use it for the Sinatra product. We can use it for other products as well. That's another great example of just an old cooperage experiment that they were working on, again, way before anybody had a thought to do a Jack Daniel's whiskey to honor Frank Sinatra, right? That was never a thought to make that product. It was about what can we do to experiment with this barrel to change the flavor or manipulate the flavor of the whiskey. So,
all right, was there one over here? I saw someone pointing. Is there though? There were Tarak. We got you. We could probably do one more after Tarak, but Tarek. I've been calling you Tarak for years. I'm never going to let it go. This is our buddy Tarek, Elixir Wine and Spirits. Many of you have been Taraked in your life. That's where you have way too much and spend way too much all in the same time.
It's Tonic. You said it right.
That's the first
Well,
time he's ever done anything right.
First of all, thank you for having me here. Team Grease, 100%. 100%. Well, but thank you for introducing me. Thank you for giving me mic. And I want to say thank you. Why to you is that day in, day out in a retail floor, and we deal with a lot of customers, and some of the argument about allocated bottles and this and that, what we discuss with customers. And there are a lot of experts you talk to, also a lot of so-called experts you talk to, a lot of snobs, and I fall into that category sometimes. But one of the things I use day in, day out for describing Jack, that it's not a political statement, but if you elect a whiskey democratically, Jack is undoubtedly king of whiskey. And thank you for holding the fort down and making it consistency.
Thank you.
Thank
man.
you.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love it. I'm going to
Jack
use that.
for
That's really
president.
good.
Yeah, that was good. You're going to have to pay royalties down to Elixir Wine and
Right?
Spirits
Yeah,
in
no
Springfield,
kidding.
Tennessee. Anyone else before we wrap up with Chris? All right, Jason. Oh, yeah, Jason. There we go, buddy. This is our good buddy Jason came here from Salt Lake.
Oh, man. All right.
To hang out here tonight.
Okay. I've been trying to think of a question. But first of all, I want to say this is such an amazing event. So my question is very simple. Why these two yahoos?
Right? I've been wondering the same thing. I don't know.
I do want to follow up by saying that, in all seriousness, these two are some of the greatest people I've ever met, and I'd run through a wall for them. And I'm so glad that you get the chance to hang out with them as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I what a great way to, I know we're getting close to the end. I don't know. We can have more, whatever you want to do. But, no, again, thanks to Will and Grease both. They have been to Lynchburg numerous times now. You know, they're kind of part of the Lynchburg family, whether they like it or not at this point. I like it. All right. Don't go knocking on my door tonight at midnight.
We got to get them Squire memberships somehow.
Yeah, right?
We're not squires. How are we not squires?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to talk to somebody in that department. That's out of the distiller's scope. But you know what, though, really, like I said earlier tonight, I'm so glad that we were able to get this whiskey out here to as many people as possible. Because, look, I would love to triple how much we can put in the bottle next year. But we're not going to be able to. There's just not going to be that much left in the barrel. And we do things, sometimes we'll even use 375 bottles to get more bottles out if we know it's going to be so small, because we want it to get in as many people's hands as possible. And we try to keep pricing reasonable as well. I mean, everything is getting, as we all know, everything is getting more expensive. So, but, I can promise you the team at Jack Daniel's thinks about all these things. And we just want to get our whiskey in as many people's hands as we can. And however we can do that. And tonight is the perfect example of that, and to be able to share this whiskey. So thanks to you two guys for making it happen for us here.
I don't know if you know this, that this isn't just Tennessee represented. Obviously, I mentioned Salt Lake. Andrew West right there lives 800 miles north of the Washington state border with Canada. And he says that's still closer to, say, Washington state than Alaska. That's how far north he lives. But we have Texas, we have Virginia, we have Pennsylvania, Colorado, Las Vegas, and Michigan. So we've got a lot of people traveled for this because they believe in what Jack Daniel's is doing. And I haven't seen a distillery put in as much work to reach out and make that connection with the enthusiast community. That, whiskey's been selling. It's doing great. But the team, men and his team and the distillery itself have put in so much work to connect with the drinker instead of just taking it for granted. And that's a testament to people traveling to Franklin, Tennessee for a Saturday night to hang out.
Yeah,
awesome. They got some good whiskey, but it's, once again, we can't say thank you enough to you and to the team that helped orchestrate this, and to Dave as well for letting us invade his space, because it's really special, but I'll beat this dead horse as long as I can, that it's just about the people, and sharing this whiskey together is much more special than just drinking it by yourself. So thank you, Chris. Do we have any other questions?
Let's do a cheers to Chris Fletcher.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it.
I mean, this opportunity, guys, does not exist. It doesn't exist, okay? And this is very special, and Jack Daniel's, made this happen for everybody. And we just thank you, Chris.